Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the August 25th Blue Earth County Board of Commissioners meeting. We're going to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go to our agenda review. Bob?
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda today.
I'll move approval of the agenda. Landcamer?
Purvis seconds.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jesse, call the roll, please.
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye. All right, and we will go right on the on to the CASA 16 Trail Bid Award. Ryan, are you on the phone?
I am. Good morning. Hear me all right?
We can hear you, and by the way, happy birthday, Ryan.
Thank you very much. I apologize for not being able to be there in person today, however, taking some precautions.
Oh, we can handle it, but go ahead.
All right. With one action under consideration today, and that is for the Texas State Highway in Stolzen Road Trail Project. We had an engineer down $580,000, which was very conservative, and we received 6 bids overall well for our engineer's estimate. The low bid being for Nicholson Blacktop, in the total amount of $363,000, $5.09 for 37% under our estimate. They've informed us that they intend to be project early next spring and have it done by the April completion date. And I would recommend approval of this project of blacktopping.
Landcamer moves Nielsen blacktopping.
People seconds.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Ryan, I didn't quite hear the completion date.
It's late June 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, because we're having a little bit of audio issues, the Nielsen blacktopping bid was for $363,075.99, which was 37% below our engineer's estimate.
It's a great savings of money there.
A copy of the engine of abstract should also send out to you or send me available that has detailed the bids.
All right.
I'm anticipating that we will need this money or $6 in the project with the transportation alternatives and DNR grants received in the low bid.
All right. Great.
That's
Any other discussion?
a good thing.
It is.
Yeah, it's going to make that area really good. It's a good partnership with the city of Mankato, and that's a very positive trail that'll be put there for the safety of our people in Blue Earth County, especially our children going to school. Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye. Thank you very much, Ryan. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ryan.
Bye, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
If I could, one more item, it's quick educational, informed by the city of Mankato that they anticipate opening the stadium and full round this week.
Oh.
Yeah, I
The
heard.
roundabout
Yeah,
on Stadium this week.
I
heard that.
I heard that from
Yep.
Jeff this morning at the airport commission, so that's a real positive thing too, so. But thank you very much, Ryan.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Our next is planning and zoning. And we will let you go ahead and introduce yourself and for the people online.
Sure, Scott Salisbury with Property Environmental Resources.
All right, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. PC 10-20 is the first item. It's a conditional use permit from James and Susan Schul and Sunvest Solar. And it's a conditional use permit for a 1.454 megawatt solar energy system. The site is located in the agricultural zoning district in the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter, section 11, Mapleton Township. The Planning Commission staff presented the report. Bill French from Sunvest Solar was present and indicated his company's willingness to comply with the conditions contained in the staff report. There was no other public comment. There was discussion by the Planning Commission regarding truck traffic crossing the township road and potential impacts to the county tile line. The Planning Commission recommended adding a condition that the applicant repair any potential damage to that county tile that may occur during construction. Following discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the county board with the added condition in the staff report, as well as to adopt the findings prepared by staff and the board actions or resolution.
And this is a public hearing. So if you're on the conference call, would like to make a comment at this time, please state your name and address for the record. And everybody will have an opportunity to speak, so be patient. Is there anyone that would like to speak to PC 10-20? Anyone that would like to speak to PC 10-20 on the solar field? One more time. Anybody wish to speak on PC 10-20? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board.
Brunder will move approval.
People will second.
I got a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Just a question, does the tile go under the road or is it adjacent?
It goes under the road,
Okay.
crosses it from east to west there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
No.
Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stuenberg.
Aye. All right, next one.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
PC 11-20 is a request from Crystal Valley Cooperative. It is a request for review and approval of the preliminary plat of Crystal Valley subdivision. The proposed subdivision plat will create 2 lots within the Highway Business Zone District. The property is in the the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter, Section 6, Garden City Township. Staff presented the report. The applicant was represented. There was no other public comment. The Planning Commission expressed no concern with the request. Following the discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the county board and to adopt the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is a resolution.
All right. This is a public comment portion of the hearing. And if you're on the conference call line, would like to make a comment on this item, please state your name and address for the record. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak, so please be patient. Is there anyone wishing to comment to PC 11-20 on the Crystal Valley Co-op subdivision? Anyone wishing to speak to PC 11-20? Anyone wishing to speak to PC 11-20? Hearing no one, bring it back to the board.
Purvis moves approval.
Landcamer seconds.
I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. Seeing no discussion, Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. And the next one, George.
PC 12-20 is a request from Cheryl Keitzer, Reggie Reed, and Lori Vols Revocable Living Trust. It's a request for review and approval of the preliminary plat of Shady Tree Estates Number 2. The request is a replat of Lot 4, Block 1, and Outlot A of Shady Tree Estates, and will reconfigure Lot 4, Block 1 to include a portion of Outlot A. The property is zoned rural residence and is within the Shoreline Overlay District of Lake Washington. The property is located in the northeast quarter of Section 19, Jamestown Township. Staff presented the report. The applicants were represented and had no additional comment. There was no other public comment. The Planning Commission members had no objections to the request. Following the discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the County Board and to adopt the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is a resolution.
Thank you, George. This time we'll open the public comment portion of the hearing. And if you're on the conference call line and would like to make a comment on this item, please state your name and address for the record. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak, so please be patient. Does anyone wish to speak to PC 12-20? Does anyone wish to speak to PC 12-20? And one last time, does anyone wish to speak to PC 12-20? Hearing no one, I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, no questions. I'll move the resolution 12-20.
Brunder will second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from the board?
A lot of items on the agenda. They had a lot of discussion at the planning and zoning meeting, but again, with the COVID and this way of operating public hearings, there's not a whole lot of comments to report. So
Okay.
it's kind of the same thing for the rest of them we have going today. I just thought I'd share that, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much.
They all went very well, though. The staff does a great job. That's one thing we have going for us. Blue Earth County is, when they bring the report to us, it's complete. So we appreciate that.
Thank you very much for that. Any other discussion or comments? Not seeing any. Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis,
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg,
Aye. All right, we'll jump into PC 13-20. George?
PC 13-20 is a request from Lance and Erica Gettle. It is for review and approval of a conditional use permit to operate a fertilizer business. The use will primarily service the applicant's own needs, but fertilizer may also be sold to other farmers. The property is zoned agricultural and is in the northwest quarter of Section 4, Lincoln Township. Mr. Rolfing presented the staff report. There was no public comment. The Planning Commission expressed no issues with the request. Following the discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the County Board and to adopt the findings prepared by staff, and the board action is a resolution.
All right. At this time, we'll open the public comment portion of the hearing. If you're on the conference call line and would like to make a comment on this item, please state your name and address for the record. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak, so please be patient. Is there anyone wishing to speak on PC 13-20? Is there anyone wishing to speak on PC 13-20? One last time. Is there anyone wishing to speak to PC 13-20? Hearing no one, I'll bring it back to the board.
Purvis moves approval.
Brunder will second.
I got a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion? Hearing none. Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis,
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. Jump into PC 15-21. And Scott, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. PC 15-20 is a request from Blue Earth County to review and approve amendments to the Blue Earth County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 24, the zoning chapter, to establish standards for interim uses and interim use permits. The ordinance amendment establishes the application criteria, public notification requirements, public hearing review, and approval process for interim use permits. The amendments to Chapter 24 also reclassifies several existing conditional uses as interim uses in all zoning districts. At the Planning Commission meeting, staff presented the report. There was no public comment. The Planning Commission indicated that the amendment will better protect and serve the interests of the county and is needed due to changes that were made to statute back in 2008. Just a quick summary of some of the uses that were reclassified from conditional uses to interim uses were, uses that are temporary in nature, like elder care, home occupations, mining, as well as solar energy systems. So we went through every district and just moved uses that we thought were of a temporary nature over to this interim use category from conditional uses. We didn't change any permitted uses, and we didn't eliminate any uses that were existing conditional uses, just moved ones that, in staff's opinion, were of a temporary nature to this interim use category. Following discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request of the County Board and to adopt the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is an ordinance.
At this time, we'll open the public comment portion of the hearing. If you're on the conference call line and would like to make a comment on this item, please state your name and address for the record, and everyone will have an opportunity to speak, so please be patient. Does anyone wish to speak on PC 15-20 on the interim use plan? Is there a Carol on the line?
Yes, I am.
All right, did you want to speak on this, Carol?
Just got on here, stand ready.
Okay, why don't you first of all, give your name, Carol, and so we have it on record.
Okay, Carol, Dean,
Okay? And how are you associated with this, Carol?
I am the, River Bluff Health.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, she'll actually be testifying on item number 1420, the last one on the list.
Oh.
We're changing the ordinances so that she can actually apply for this. So she'll be, that's be my understanding, but she'll be testifying, or maybe have some comments on PC 1420, the River Bluff Land Incorporated.
is that right, Carol?
Correct.
All right, well, I'm sorry I called you out then early. We'll get to you a little bit, okay?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand it.
No, I'll call you out in a little bit, okay?
Okay.
All right. Does anyone else wish to speak on PC 15-20? Anyone wish to speak on PC 15-20? With that, I'll bring it back to the board.
Brunder will move approval.
Purvis seconds.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Brunder here. I just think this is going to be a good fit for our Blue Earth County ordinance. I always had a problem when we do conditional use permits and they go with the land. I never understood that, and I just thought that so someone opens up an auto repair shop out in the rural area. The person does a great job running it, but the next person coming in has the right to run it that way without going through any conditional use permit. And I just never really understood that. I think that'll kind of fill that gap. Not that we've had a problem with it in the past, as far as I know, but this just does give us one more look at something, whether someone's doing a good job when someone comes in and does a bad job, and just so they understand what their recommendations and conditions are from the staff. So I think this is just a good way to keep things more in order and a little better track of things. So thank you to the staff for getting it done for us.
And I want to thank Kip for that explanation. I had called yesterday about this because I was confused why an interim was the same price as a regular conditional use permit. And it was explained to me that you get the second look at it, to make sure that everything's as it should be. So I agree. I think this is a really good, positive thing. So
Any
thank
other-
you, Kip, for explaining that.
Any other discussion?
First and a second?
No, we did. Okay. Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder.
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. Thank you, Scott. Go into PC 16-20.
Yeah, just before we do that, we have a resolution for the fees for the interim use permits, just associated with
Oh.
PC 15. And that would just be to adopt the application fees necessary to implement the interim use permit. And basically, the interim use permit would follow the same application process as a conditional use permit. So staff is recommending a $350 interim use fee that would be the same as the conditional use permit fee. And then the board action to adopt that fee would just be a resolution.
Brunder will move the adoption of the $350 fee.
People, second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. Thank you for that, Scott. I know I kind of jumped over that one.
Sure.
All right, on to the 16-20.
Yeah, PC 16-20 is another request from Blue Earth County. And it's to review and approve amendments to the Blue Earth County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 24, the zoning chapter to establish standards for self-service storage facilities, which are mini storage facilities. The ordinance amendment also adds self-service storage facilities as interim uses in the agricultural, general business, highway business, and light industrial zoning districts. At the Planning Commission meeting, staff presented the report. There was no public comment. The Planning Commission did ask about setbacks and density, and staff explained that we don't have any specific standards for density or setbacks. The underlying zoning district setbacks would be what would apply for property line, setback, side, and rear yards. And the Planning Commission acknowledged that there's been an interest in storage units, and that since the land use plan was updated. And then following discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the county board and adopt the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is a resolution, or excuse me, an ordinance.
And this is a public hearing, and this is the time for the public comment portion. If you're on the conference call line, would like to make a comment on PC 16-20, please state your name and address for the record. If there's anyone that would like to speak on PC 16-20, anyone on the line that would like to speak to PC 16-20? Hearing no one, I'll bring it back to the board.
Purvis moves approval.
Landcamer seconds.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Brunder here. I would just like to say that, we heard a lot about this when we started our public hearings in the rural area when we redid our land use plan. And so this is just kind of one of those pieces that we're getting done after we started all that. But it's a small piece. I think it's going to be a good piece to add to our system. And it is just for storage units, so it doesn't affect the septics and all that stuff, which is a big concern out in the rural area. So,
Huge.
I think this will be a good fit for our planning and zoning and all. The rural area with a little bit more development, some more tax base.
I just have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to thank the staff for your diligence and your hard work on this. I appreciate everything you did on it.
Was it, Mr. Chair, people, was there any kind of questions with it? I mean, it was, with anybody, because, so it's anywhere, I guess like farmers still need self-storage? I don't know, just joking. But, so there wasn't any questions really from anybody regarding the things with the self-storage space?
No, at the Planning Commission, we didn't have any public comment, and just mostly Planning Commission discussion on it.
So there was no negative issues on this?
No, there weren't.
Mr. Chair, is this similar to the city of Mankato? I know there's self-storage in the city of Mankato. Is this similar to that?
Yeah, it's similar to Mankato and
Yeah.
some of the other cities that we looked at and counties to get standards. Honestly, there's not a lot of counties that have specific standards for self-service storage facilities. So some of the metro counties have that. So we pulled some of their standards and just kind of modified them to kind of fit Blue Earth County. And then in the agricultural district, that's, we just have a limit on the size there at 10,000 square feet. So,
Yeah. I really appreciate you reaching out to other places to see what they've done, because I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel, but we can
Correct.
take the best of what we can get from other people. So, nice job.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
good.
Mr. Chair, one more clarification, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is already allowed in the general business, highway business, and light industrial.
correct. That's what we've
So
permitted
we
them
just
in.
added ag.
Yeah, we permitted them that way in the past. It's
Yeah.
not specifically allowed in our ordinance. We made the interpretation that they're similar to warehousing, so
Sure.
we've permitted them that way in the past. But this specifically allows them.
Great.
There's one more comment. I just think there's a lot of this going on out in the rural areas that are informal. A lot of, especially a lot of farmers that no longer have a need for a big machine shed. They're renting them out to storage for stuff like this. So I think that this will be a good addition to our ordinances.
That's, Mr. Chair, what I was kind of alluding to. I figured that's where there were a lot of farmers that might have, that don't need the space. Okay.
Any other discussion?
Appreciate it.
With that, Jesse, could you call a roll?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder.
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer.
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. All right. And we will now jump to PC 14-20, the River Bluff Lands Incorporated.
I'm George Leary again with Blue Earth County Planning, Property and Environmental Resources. PC 14-20 is a request from River Bluff Lands Incorporated. Is a request for review and approval of an interim use permit to allow construction of an 8,400 square foot storage building. The property is zoned agricultural and it is in the south half of the northwest quarter of Section 21 Cambria Township. Staff presented the report. There was no public comment. The Planning Commission expressed no concerns with the request. Following the discussion and a roll call vote, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the County Board and to adopt the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is a resolution.
All right. At this time, we'll open the public comment portion of the hearing. If you are on the conference call line and would like to make a comment on this item, please state your name and address for the record. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak, so please be patient. Is there anyone wishing to comment? Carol, I believe this is yours. Are you still on the line?
I am here.
Would you like to comment on what's going on there?
The primary purpose of police for storage of cameras, recreational children. Previously, this classified as aware, and the pattern is not anywhere near house.
So it's going to be a recreational place, is that correct?
Storage.
No, it's for storage of recreational and large farming equipment.
All right, so, very good. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm here available for any questions.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Carol?
I don't, Mr. Chair.
No.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Is there anyone else on the line that would like to speak to PC 14-20? One more time, is there anyone that would like to speak on PC 14-20? Seeing or hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Purvis moves approval.
Landcamer seconds.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just a comment, I'm assuming the reason this is coming to the board is it's larger than the 10,000 square feet.
No, it's actually
smaller.
less, it's 8,400 square feet, but it's,
8,400,
it's
okay.
it's the interim use
Permit.
permit
Okay.
that's triggering this here, that was just
Okay.
approved.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good. Any other discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. And that will be the end of our planning and zoning.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Carol, thanks for commenting on the line. Thank you very much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Have a
Thank you,
good
George
day,
and
Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for hearing me.
All right. So now we will go back to Human Services.
Mr. Chair, they're on their way in.
On their way in, all right.
I see him coming.
See you here.
I can see him coming. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hello, hello.
And while they're getting ready, just making sure you all saw Phil's son ask his younger brother to be his best man.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the paper.
Wasn't that amazing?
It was so nice.
Talk about getting national news.
It was a lot of fun. It was wild.
That was
wild
I
ride.
don't know how many
Hits.
hits we
Right.
got on that.
It's
Hundreds of
definitely
thousands.
it's definitely millions. The just ESPN was up to like 4 million, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, it's crazy.
It's really special.
Really was.
Yeah.
Really was. Thank you.
That's pretty awesome.
It was. I say I have a nightmare that I'm going to wake up from. It's called COVID, and this really fun dream that I'm going to wake up from. It was the boys has been going viral. Yeah, so those are the two different things. You ready for me, Mr. Chair?
We are so ready for you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for hearing us today, Kelly and I, and Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I have just one real action item. It's got two parts to it regarding chemical health again. And I brought a number of these your way to do our chemical dependency assessments. And this is for House of Hope. And it's just a unique one because they did decide to shut down their operations in March. And so there was kind of that formality of them discontinuing at that time and now reopening their business again. And so they provided this for us in the past. So it's not really new, but we had to kind of make sure we got all of our governance in line here with the contracts. And so the standardized rate is the same as all the others that we brought to the board at $155 per assessment. And that, I do have a comment in there, is a little light, and so I think we'll look at that over time. And I've always mentioned to you all that there is this process of substance use disorder reform coming in the next 1 to 2 years. It keeps getting pushed backwards, and certainly with COVID, it got pushed back even further. But there will be changes coming as we go down the road. So you're going to probably keep hearing about some of these types of contracts in chemical health. The term is September 1st of 20 through December 31st of 21. And the nuance is that they have two locations, so two different contracts is how we write that. One is on 3rd Avenue and the other is in the Civic Center Plaza. And that's all I have for action items today.
I'll move approval of the action item for House of Hope, Rule 25, CD assessments. Landcamer.
People will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
It's just a comment. I didn't realize they had two places.
And I think that's newer, that they split and then COVID hit and they shut down and now they're reopening both of those different places.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was my question too, follow-up. I mean, so the one at Civic Center would be the same, being where it's at, as the one at Hope? Because Hope people are housed there?
Right, it's similar. I'm guessing, and I don't know this for sure, but coming from this world, is that I'm guessing the one in the Civic Center is pretty outpatient focused.
Okay.
And so people can come and go, and it's, part of a public scene.
Kind of,
And
yeah.
so it feels a little more like an office, as opposed to their other facility that's more like a residential facility.
It's so needed in the Mankato area.
Very much so.
Worth County area, and it's just so needed, so,
Great.
it's nice to see him back.
Can I ask one more question? Are we still having a real challenging time trying to get people into treatment,
I think-
time-wise?
Yeah, and I know we have talked about this
Yeah.
recently, Commissioner, and it still is an issue about trying to find the right bed. This is the most counterintuitive thing I'm about to say, but I think the hardest time we have is with the people that have the most acute needs, so the highest needs. And so if there's behaviors, I know we have one gentleman who has a lot of aggressive behaviors. Finding the right place for someone like that is really difficult. And there are a few facilities, of course, but their beds are full and there's waiting lists. And so there's this real counterintuitive thing where you say, okay, you're at the highest risk, and we're going to make you wait the longest. And so that's really feels broken still in that regard. I think your usual and customary outpatient programming, I think that flows through fairly quickly and nicely, and our providers are pretty accommodating. So we're usually to work out those a little better, but it's those real high-end cases that are tough.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, we need vote on this, right? Jesse, could you call the roll?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair again, and to commissioners, I have a few informational items, ending with Kelly's going to do another update for us on public health, so I'll turn it over to her there. 3 items prior to that, talked a little bit about our vulnerable adult investigations. We have a slide there. We have findings for how adult protection activities went in 2019, and then a more current view of our licensing status for adult foster care. So I'm going to go through those slides before I ask Kelly to come up. The first of those is that pie chart, and that just breaks down. It's one we've used this formatting before with the board, highlighting obviously the self-neglect is such a big issue, and it is probably one of our primary roles where somebody's in a situation where they're vulnerable and they're not able to care for themselves. I think we all feel we are, no matter what, and then reality hits, and there's a gap. And so you see that as being the biggest piece of the pie, so to speak here. And then if you combine the fiscal impropriety, that's always another big category. So those two, if they're fiduciary people that have the responsibility to take care of the money, or if it's a family member. But sadly to say that that's the second biggest category. And then even though they're the most pronounced one of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and other things that happen, neglect from a caregiver, those are usually a smaller number. So this is pretty commensurate with what we've seen in past years, but it does provide the board a snapshot of just how cases that are substantiated kind of filter out in those different categories. The next bigger slide is kind of the raw data, if you will, and how things get triaged. And so the bar charts show over the past several years, a pretty flat sense of how many raw reports we get, but some differences in how they track out year over year. This year, or 19, was a year where we had a lot of screened-in reports, and Ann told me that this is actually due to, I'm sorry, this is Lynette. Ann does licensing. Lynette Ayers is a supervisor in charge, but this is due to a lot of self-neglect cases that they are substantiated because the need is there. There's really not a third party. There's not a counter-argument. There's no fact-finding, really. It's really pretty easy to say, is this person able to care for themselves or not? And so because that number was higher, our screened-in reports were higher, and our substantiated reports were higher than in previous years. So those are probably the most remarkable pieces of that picture.
Mr. Chair, how do these normally come to the county?
Right, it's a lot like child protection. So we have a system, and this one's MIC, M-I-I-C. I can't even tell you what it stands for, but there is a system that's put in place by the state that they can call into, and they actually screen the calls, but then we do get the calls, and we go out on calls just like child protection. And I was reading the rules last night in case you guys quizzed me, but it is so confusing. So like I will tell you, we're about to do foster care. So in every category of child foster care, corporate child foster care, family foster care for adults, and corporate adult family foster care, we do the maltreatment piece, except for adult foster care. So there's one exception in that list. And that is who does the licensing and who does the investigations. We do everything except one piece that the state does. And then it flips, like in child care, we do most all the maltreatment except for corporate foster care, so that's different. I mean, corporate child care, so that's different. And they do that one. And how that ever came to be, I mean, we have commissioners that have previous legislative experience. I don't know how the story is on this, but it's really hard to track, and I have to look it up every time because there's all these exceptions. And so we get a case, especially a high-end case that might hit the paper, and you're like, whose is it, you know, between the state and ours, because there's just a few exceptions to the rules. But yeah, we would go out, and then there's also rules, Commissioner, about if we go out with law enforcement, if there's criminal activity, and that's what I was looking at, Will, is if there's criminal activity, then it could very well be the jurisdiction of law enforcement that would do the primary. We might go with them, might not, depending on the nature of what it is. So.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The last slide I have, Commissioners, is about adult foster care, and you'll see these two kind of categories, also somewhat confusing, but if we do them every year, eventually we'll all get this down and pass the quiz. But the population served in adult foster care are listed out, and I think those are helpful. So developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, brain injury, chemical health, and mental illness, and then also just serving someone who's elderly and in need. So those are all categories that can be served by adult foster care. Then there's these two different types of foster care, like I kind of mentioned with the licensing components. And we license both of these, but we only do maltreatment investigations in the first one here, which is adult family foster care. So this would be the family that has a home where they want to do a business out of their home and bring people in and do adult foster care. So that's kind of that definition of family foster care. And the same is true for children. And then there's corporate foster care where they hire staff, and their staff don't live there. They go on rotations of obviously the hours they work, and so it's a corporate setting. And actually, that's very similar to child care providers too. Some people do it out of their home, and some people have centers. So that's pretty consistent. Back to this first group, then you see there's 30 beds that we have that are in the family foster care, so a relatively small number. But you do see in the box chart how we're spread out in a number of counties that we serve. And so this is where, along with the next one, where you see when we say we're a hub, especially in adult foster care, these numbers aren't great, but you see them spread out in many counties. But then you get to adult corporate foster care, and you see a huge number of providers in town. And so it's just something for the board to be aware of, that we do have this presence, this footprint out there. And we have, a lot of agencies that run some of this work as well. So yeah, you'll see the split. That we do have some open beds. Actually, that's a little rare. A lot of times beds, like I was saying, when the commissioner asked about chemical health beds, they're hard to come by. But right now we do have some openings. So that's, to me, a good thing. Yeah. And then if we go down to the corporate piece, the last chunk, 101 corporate homes with 378 beds as compared to 30 beds, more than 10 fold what we have in the family foster care side. You'll still see those homes are spread out a bit within our county, but mostly in Mankato with 344 beds there. So that is the picture. It's been a pretty stable situation. You hear us talk often about foster care providers, how dependent we are on both, the family foster care especially, that we work very closely with, but also the corporate folks that are in that business. I don't know what we'd do without them, and it is the most cost-effective care that we can buy. As far as that goes too, the prices are really reasonable, and they do a real service. And these families, it really is a family environment, so I don't know how you put a price on that when you have a loved one in a situation like that. And that's really all I have. I'm going to pause maybe, Mr. Chair, and see if there's any questions for me, or I'll have Kelly come up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Ready for the heat today?
We are.
Save it for winter.
That's right.
Thank God for air conditioning.
Try anyway.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. All right. Wonderful. Thanks for having me again. This time I brought pictures. Last time I didn't have quite enough time to pull that together. Just a little bit of visual. So this very first slide shows our food food pantry. It's actually labeled with a whiteboard in front of it. So if a person needs assistance, we grab 2 bags, one of one, and then 2 of 2, or 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, and then a case of water. And that gets one person through an entire week. So there's vegetables in there, there's crackers, there's all sorts of food that you really only need a microwave or a stove for, so that we don't have to worry about refrigeration or freezing or space or things like that. So we can really serve anybody in any situation with those food kits. So, and that was put together actually by our SHIP staff who work in some of the nutrition areas. So that was a great tie-in with our SHIP staff. We do continue to provide essential services to Blue Earth County residents. We are probably over 30. Just this weekend, we were able to drop off some of those food kits, some thermometers, some masks, and a number of other cleaning supplies to a house to help them stay healthy. And this next slide just has a few of the things we've been working on. So a little bit of a snippet. We'll be going through a number of different areas. The Minnesota Department of Health, since the last time I was here, switched from the REDCap system to a system called MEDS, which is the Minnesota Electronic Data Surveillance System. So of course, anytime there's a shift in databases, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but luckily we had been in MEDS with some of our TB investigations prior to this. We've been in contact with all of our school districts regarding their plans for the coming school year. That was definitely a lot of meetings. We've had some great conversations with all of our districts. We've worked with the we've worked with MDH and MDE. They were still working on forming the regional teams. I believe there's a meeting today that some of my staff are attending that will help support schools through this next school year. We've also worked with the Department of Corrections for the possible release of inmates with COVID-19 and how would that look. Our goal would be to support within the house that they have here in Blue Earth County. Again, providing food and supplies and different things in there and hopefully making that work. We continue to work collaboratively with a lot of our community partners. We had a property meeting with the City of Mankato and the property managers, which was very successful. It was the first time MSU, the City of Mankato, and Blue Earth County Public Health had been together, and it was very well attended and very well received. We have another one next week with the focus being what's working for you and what's sharing with each other. So less of us talking and more of them sharing successes and challenges and how they've resolved that. And then also we were part of the planning with Greater Mankato Growth on the distribution of masks to businesses.
Wonderful.
Thanks. All right. Other updates, we obviously continue to monitor COVID-19 data on a daily basis. We continue to participate in a lot of calls. There's over 20. We had 2 drop off, and I was just super excited, and then 2 more were added on within a week. So we're still over 20. We're monitoring the impact of decreased ability to tap into SHIP funds for COVID-19 response. Their new grant cycle starts November 1st. So that could be a fiscal challenge for us, depending on what other funding comes down the pike. But of course, it's a couple months away, but something we're monitoring. There's also a coming shift to regional contact tracing and investigation. So that shift to MEDS that I mentioned earlier, that's part of the shift to the regional model. There is still contracts coming, information coming. It seems to change each time we ask. Before we had to commit that 0.6 FTE. Now it's not a 0.6 FTE we're hearing, but there's a contract coming. So we'll see what that contract and what the information is when that is released.
Mr. Chair, so each county in that region had to do a 0.6. Is that correct?
Correct.
And,
if you were going to
now it
be
might change.
Pardon?
And now it might change?
Now it might change. So now it sounds like it's more either you're in or you're not. And what that means for FTE or we're hearing there's funding behind that, so that's a good thing. We'll know more when the contracts arrive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We continue to work with our healthcare partners in the South Central Healthcare Coalition to plan for vaccination efforts. We're hearing We're still hearing a lot about vaccination, possibly a multi-series, so just like other vaccinations where you don't just receive one vaccination, you receive 2 or 3. Working with our clinics, our hospitals, we have a lot of closed pod agreements back. I did not get a count. More came in yesterday. So we're hoping to maybe do some work with our nursing homes with flu vaccine, possibly to get that out to them and shift the vaccine out to those pods or points of dispensing to have them do their own vaccinations and see how that goes. We'll be able to do a test run, hopefully. There's a grant application with that. Jeez. Questions on that?
Just a comment. I know Sean from Region 9 has been delegated to the state emergency ops and is looking for places to do large vaccinations. So it's a positive thing, I think.
Yep, and we have been in contact with him, coordinated all of the folks that we usually, because we do things so much as a group down here, so that we just always have the right people at the table. So yes, we've been in contact with Sean as well.
It's nice that connection's there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So another really great update to give is that Blue Earth Taxi is now providing rides to COVID people who are symptomatic for COVID. So they they were great. We did some education on infection control, provided some PPE, and we have really just been doing a great service for our community, getting folks to where they need to be for medical care.
Do they, Mr. Chair, do they still call them Blue Earth County Taxi?
I think it's just Blue Earth Taxi.
Because it used to be, I think that would be
I
the
believe.
same one. I don't know. There was one that always said Blue Earth County on it.
What's the cost? Did it depend on how far it is, or?
A little bit. So there's a base of $40 pickup fee, and then it's $5 per mile, and then a 50-cent a minute wait, because of course that vehicle cannot be used to take anyone else anywhere until that ride is done and the vehicle has been disinfected. So the per mile and per weight could vary depending on where we're coming from or the line.
Mr. Chair, do you have any idea how many do you say that they usually get, maybe during each day or business week?
I don't know for sure. I know for us, there's probably been a total of 6 rides.
6?
And this is a relatively new development, so I expect that there will be more we have a weekly or every other week call I'm involved with our shelters and other congregate care settings, and we did talk with them about this Monday. So I expect that there might be some additional rides now that resource is out there and more known.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, and then of course just managing other non-COVID programs. The normal public health business is continuing to increase. That we also working on grants and budgets and reports as well. And then I started with pictures, so I'm going to end with pictures. There in number 1 is the whiteboard that marks our COVID essential service pantry. Number 2 is just another picture of the groceries, the kits that we send out. Number 3 are bags with cleaning supplies to help if our shelters that have space for isolation and quarantine, we can take one of those bags. We don't have to think about what they need. We just take that bag, 1 per person that they're helping. So working on our efficiency. And then number 4 is just masks. We have bags, sometimes it rains and we need to protect things, and more in plastic, paper towels, disinfectants, and stuff. So we have an inventory list that we update when we bring things in and take things out.
Are you, I know we're not looking forward to it, but I'm hearing a lot of colleges that are, because of opening, in fact, there was one on the news, they had like 560 cases of COVID this first week. Are we ramping up stuff or something because of our MSU and other colleges starting?
Yeah, we've been in contact with MSU, and they have full isolation and quarantine plans, very well developed. They're again trying to support on-campus students on campus, and then we would come in with essential service supplies as needed for those students. Obviously, off-campus students would be our responsibility as well. But so yes, we've been working with them and planning. We know there certainly could be an increase, and are aware and ready to manage that.
And the school system, District 77, how are they working around a plan and stuff for that too? Or?
Yep, all of our schools have a plan, and all of the conversations were included them being nimble by this is what we're planning now, knowing that that could shift. I really think those regional teams that are coming through the educational cooperatives on a regional level will be key in how to kind of manage this on a regional level, because obviously we have more than one school district in Blue Earth County, and it'll be helpful to have the same team supporting all of those schools.
So each school could be different.
It could
as
be.
I understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
It depends on, how many students do they have? What's their physical space? If you have a school that has a high number of students and smaller space, that obviously they have to make different plans than a district that maybe has the same number of students but has just a larger physical plant.
And windows make a difference.
And windows make a difference. And yeah, different, where do they have plexiglass? How are they able to manage flow through their schools? There's a lot of variables.
So many things that we haven't thought about before and now are.
Yeah, we this is a similar conversation to tuberculosis when we go in and look for how would this virus or would the bacteria transmit? How big is the room? Who is facing who? What does the air duct look like? What's the ventilation like? So those things that happen sometimes behind the scenes that are now very, very not behind the scenes.
We all are doing a great job, so thank you.
Thank you for your support. We very much appreciate it.
And I would, I'm sure this isn't a question for you, probably more for Bob, but I'm sure that everything here is covered under the CARES Act.
Mr. Chair, yes, the public health staff time that's being dedicated to COVID is covered under the funding that we've received.
Just to follow up on that, but if you are drawing from SHIP or something like that, that's also covered, I would assume. Anybody who's not doing what they normally do, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Yes, that was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Kelly.
Very much.
You guys have a great day.
Really
Thanks.
helpful. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Could we take a short break, Mr.
We
Chair?
can. Let's take about a 10-minute break.
Mr. Chair,
All right. Well, welcome back. We are going to jump to our administrative services. So Bob, could you take it away?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the first item is the county board minutes for August 11th.
Purvis moves the minutes.
Langhammer seconds.
We have a motion and a second on the minutes. Any discussion or comments? Jesse, call a roll, please.
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis,
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. Is there somebody on the phone now, Jesse?
There are. Do we have staff from Micah listening in at the moment?
We are here. This is Matt Lawson. Thank you.
All right, Matt, we're going to let you take it away. We're ready for you.
Well, good. Thank you. Apologize for being a couple minutes late. We were attending the Stern County Board meeting remotely and ran a little over. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Inter-County Association. In the interest of time, I'm going to just note in your packets you have both our PowerPoint presentation summarizing the county impacts for the last legislative session, as well as our end of session briefing. And so a lot of the information and detail is in there, and so we're just going to try to cover the highlights. And I'm going to start by trying to lead by example here, and just really, without going through much detail at all, on the first couple of slides, slides 2, 3, and 4, and 5, just to say, as you all know, this session started in an unprecedented way back in February. February, when COVID hit shortly thereafter, and attention shifted entirely to both legislation and changes in how we work, frankly, because of the COVID crisis, and legislation and executive actions that were needed to both help counties and everybody in the state respond to that. And of course, we changed the way that we supported you, hopefully in a way that was helpful throughout that time also, by supporting the staff groups that were doing a lot of work to facilitate the work that you had to do at the county level, making sure that we were getting information to the governor's office in terms of, and the legislature in terms of what was helpful to county in executive orders, what was needed in legislation in order to position counties to work and support remote work during closures, and also, frankly, to understand federal legislation that was coming down, like the federal funds, the Coronavirus Relief Act that mandated additional paid leave for COVID-related paid leave for staff and other changes. So as we got closer, as you know, we also ended up in a unique, and I'm just going to jump to slide 6, frankly, as we got closer to the end of May and the end of regular session, the initial response to the COVID crisis at the legislative level had kind of occurred. Both changes and flexibilities that counties needed immediately related to some human service, a lot of human service program changes, a lot of regulatory temporary flexibilities in terms of how those programs were administered. Those things were in place, and there was really a reemergence of both the importance of the bonding bill to being passed, as well as discussion of a supplemental budget item and a tax bill, sort of the traditional agenda, if you will, revisited. And then the thing that had added at that point that became a real high priority for MICA under CAP was that the federal government had passed the CARES Act, which included $150 billion in a coronavirus relief fund to be spread across the state, and just under $2.2 billion of that came to Minnesota, of which $1.87 billion was available to the state of Minnesota, with the expectation that some of that could be distributed to the 85 counties and other local governments that did not receive direct allocation from the federal law, as Hennepin and Ramsey have. So that really became a key priority of ours, and a key resource recognizing that counties really had a lead role given in the expenditures that were being incurred at the local level, and the response that needed to happen on the local level, given the nature of this pandemic, from your public health folks, enforcement, to human services, impacts on the judicial system, and things that you are very familiar with. It also became a key bright spot, frankly, in the outcomes of this legislative session for counties, a very positive outcome, in my opinion. And we're still hoping that we'll get some positive outcomes on the bonding bill. We've also had some good work that was done in human services and public safety. We want to touch on those throughout our update this morning. Before I turn it over to Nancy, Steve, and Carly to do that, I want to focus in and just give the highlights of the CARES Act money that same bipartisan agreement through executive action that distributed 55% of that $841.5 million in counties to the 85 counties. So 467 million counties, of which the allocation to Blue Earth is at the top of the page there. So we think it's a really good turnout. The uses of the money are very broad, and as you know, they do have to be for expenses related to the COVID crisis and response, and those impacts, of course, come in a variety of different fashions that we're working through. As of right now, they cannot be used for lost revenue, but there is the expectation on the part of the state that counties use them for any COVID-related FEMA match costs, workers' compensation costs, or public health response. I want to just say one quick thing before I turn it over to Nancy to discuss a number of the human services items, and that is that we're also following now the contemporary discussion that is happening in Washington, D.C. around the possibility of a fourth relief package, and there is pieces of that conversation that could have ramifications for this CARES Act money, and so we're watching that closely, including the possibility that the funds that you already have could have a longer runway to be used beyond December 1st if the federal government extends that December 30th timeline to a later date that they're discussing, as well as the possibility that they could be used for replacing lost revenue. A lot of big picture issues going on that discussion, obviously related to payroll tax and the money for local, more money for state and local governments, which we support, how much to put in additional weekly unemployment insurance from the federal government. A lot of bigger issues that are mostly driving that conversation, the postal service conversation, but there are elements in there that could have some direct impacts for counties, and so we're hopeful that that bill does come to Congress here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions. We'll turn it over to Nancy, Steve, and Carly, and then I'll come back at the end and I want to summarize the state budget conditions for you as we head into the 2021 session.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
No questions.
No questions at this time, so go ahead.
Wait, I have a comment. You know, the federal government has promised us since the first COVID relief bill that state and local would be in the next one, and it still hasn't happened. So I'm starting to really wonder if there will be anything for state and local governments in the future. Just a comment.
Okay.
I'm done.
Thank you. Good. Nancy?
Nancy, could you, since we're online and we're doing this, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hear me, would you?
Okay, it's coming around really garbled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. That's not all, and I don't. All right. So, is it better? Is it better on speaker?
No.
Not
No.
really.
No.
It's, I think that, Nancy, this is Jesse Anderson. I think that your very last comment where you said, is it better off speaker? It seemed like it was a little better.
Is it? Okay, I'll take it off speaker and try it here.
Yes, I think that's much better, Nancy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
One of the other things that didn't pass during the regular session was the Omnibus Health and Human Services bill. And that was because there were some folks that didn't want to have in statute the DHS powers that they were asking for. And so that kind of brought that bill to a halt. And that impacted us because we had a couple of MICA priorities in there that were then taken up in the first special session. And the first one, of course, is the Yellow Line Jail Diversion Project. And that is something that we've been working on for some time, and we did get that across the finish line then in the first special session. So just want to mention that. And then we also had an early education project, as well as a number of other things that DHS was looking at getting done that impacted counties. So what the legislature decided then to do is separate the DHS powers, which included our waivers, our waiver extensions, and put it in a separate bill. And that happened again during the special session number 1. So as you know, due to COVID, we're all operating in very different ways, and as evidenced by having conference calls and Zoom calls as opposed to in-person visits with county boards, et cetera. And there was some, in response to that, DHS had issued about almost 70 waivers. And we were all concerned, counties were concerned, that what happens then when the emergency ends, when the peacetime emergency period ended. We didn't want to be in a situation where they just flipped the switch and said, okay, counties, go back to doing business as you were before COVID. So to that end, AMC put together a Blue Ribbon Committee, which was comprised of 15 commissioners. 5 of them are medical commissioners. I want to mention them, call them out. Commissioner Landhammer was on that group, as well as Commissioners Gasaden, Holden, Rockner, and Flowick. And what they did is they basically reviewed all of the waivers that had been issued by DHS to determine what was working, what we needed to continue in county world, and perhaps what did not work and that we could let go. In the end, they came up with about 15 recommendations, and that list then was added. DHS and the legislature also added a few items to that list as well, but I just want to enforce that this was county-driven. It was a very, very quick turnaround. I think Commissioner Landhammer correct me that I think it was about 3 weeks before we needed to get a list to the legislature for that first special session. So it was quick. So in the end, I just want to mention that all waivers that have been granted are be extended for a minimum of 60 days. And then the 15 items that were identified by our commissioners are extended until June 30th of next year, 2021, which therefore puts the legislature in charge. And I think that that was helpful because there was just some feedback or some pushback, if you will, about too much control within the administration. The legislature wanted to have some say on these things. So they will then next year be in charge. What are those flexibilities? It's like tele-everything. As you know, we're using telehealth for everything, including waiver programs, targeted case management, health care, mental health care, substance use care. All of those items are extended until June of next year. There was also a piece about modifying licensing requirements related to substance use and mental health facilities. And there was language that allowed for temporary absence for folks that are currently getting state-funded housing support and they contract COVID. We want them to be able to obviously get treated for COVID and be assured that they would have a place to return to, a home to return to once they were healthy again. There was also some extensions relating to flexibility for PCA services and using telemedicine for the medical cannabis program. So that's a handful of what passed, and again, those are all in effect till next year. Another piece that's a special session number one resolved was a rate increase for providers who care for low-income children in the CCAP program, and this brings the state into federal compliance. And also, the federal government is paying for this because there was a surplus in the federal child care development block grant. So that is being paid for by the federal government. That was signed into law by Governor Wells as well. I'm going to fast forward to the most recent special session, number 3, and mention that we got an additional waiver that we've been working on. And this specifically allows for remote interviews for MSPIP recipients. Electronic signatures are allowed, but verbal signatures are not permitted under this waiver extension. So that did get included. It was actually attached to another bill that we were following that Senator Abler and others, Senator Hoffman and others in the House as well, were concerned about the day training and employment services, the DT&H services. They appropriated $20.3 million in retention grants for these eligible providers. And the providers or eligible services include adult day services, day training and habilitation, day support services, pre-vocational services, etc. There was a lot of folks that testified before the legislature that they were really in danger of closing down. So they did respond with $20 million for that, plus an additional $10 million related to public health grants for disability services for those who have implemented public health measures that facilitate social distancing practices. So those facilities are obviously very pleased with that outcome. It was a lot of work for the legislature to get that done. In terms of public health, you all know that Tobacco 21 is the law in Minnesota. Requires the person to be age 21 to purchase either tobacco, e-cigarettes, other nicotine products, and also expands the prevention of tobacco use in charters or true charter schools. Matt mentioned the public health response account. Early in March, the legislature put almost $21 million into that account, and $8.5 million of it went directly to local public health. Then a little bit later on, the legislature added another $50 million to that account, and that again goes to the Department of Health for COVID response activities. They also put $150 million into a healthcare response fund, and this is to make grants to eligible providers for costs that are related to COVID, and also to fund the establishment and operation of temporary sites for providing testing services, and also to provide treatment beds or to isolate or quarantine affected individuals. What didn't happen, I would direct you to our report, or the report of Health and Human Services on page 7. I do want to just call out a couple of things specifically, and that is the governor's supplemental budget. When he came out with that budget in February, it was about $160 million proposal, and included in that was $8.8 million to reimburse counties for substance use disorder services provided in IMD facilities. This was a result of an accounting error, a DHS accounting error, and the governor has said in many settings that he really wanted to make counties whole on that issue. That budget bill again did not pass. My understanding is that they've come up with about $58 million that they feel that could be appropriated in terms of some of the items in the governor's supplemental budget. And we do not believe that $8.8 million for counties was included in the last rendition of it. However, we're still working with key legislators and pressing the governor's office. They've indicated keep pressing on this. And so depending on what happens, if they get to a budget in the next special session, we're still working it, I guess is what I would say. Let me see what else. Another thing that didn't happen, I just want to mention quickly, is we had legislation introduced early in February that would have allowed 5 days to respond face-to-face in certain child protection situations. Right now, there's a requirement that we respond within 24 hours in certain situations. This legislation basically gave us a bit more time if there's a current law enforcement investigation underway. In other words, the child has been seen by a professional, and or if the child is residing in a location that is confirmed to restrict contact with that alleged offender. Under those very limited situations, we would have 5 calendar days to complete that face-to-face contact. We intend to go back to the legislature on that issue again next year. And the other thing that I want to mention is broadband. Included in the bill that the Senate has passed twice, but the House has not gotten to yet, was $2 million in telemedicine equipment reimbursement program, and contained in terms of eligible people or organizations that could apply for those funds included county boards and local public health. And they also had $15 million for distance learning in that bill, and another $10 million in the state's border-to-border broadband grant program. Again, the Senate has passed it twice. It's gotten hung up in the House a couple of times.
The authors of the bill are Senator Westrom and Representative Eklund, and I did talk to Representative Eklund last week, and he indicated that they're going to try again if and when the legislature comes back in September. With that, I would stop for any questions. I think all things considered, we had a pretty decent year in Health and Human Services. I certainly want to mention, and you all know I just want to mention Blue Earth County staff is second to none. Both Phil Clausen and Angie Junkerberg are so instrumental in everything that we do at MICA, and I just wanted to do a quick shout out to them.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I have a couple comments on your Angie was actually the lead in putting the waivers together for MAXA. Is it MAXA? Whatever the right term is. I get all my acronyms mixed up, but she worked with the Human Services directors in doing that piece of it along with the Blue Ribbon Committee. So lucky for all of us. I was on a call with the governor a week or two ago, and he said the HHS mistake, he said he does still believe that counties should be held harmless, and he supports that totally. The telecom, where having, good type of data is important to him. And so he supports investing in that, and he also said a priority for him is CCA and LGA. Just a comment. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And next?
I have Steve Novak with me. I'm going to hand him my phone, and he don't.
Okay.
Hi, Steve.
This is Steve Novak. Hi.
Hi.
Wish we were down there personally, but we're not. So can you hear me okay?
We can. Go ahead.
All right. I will take you through the transportation parts of the bonding bill, because about 95% of transportation this year is wrapped up in that bonding bill. It's not passed for reasons unrelated to the bill. They've really had a deal since the end of the regular session. Unfortunately, it's become a political football in terms of being held hostage by the House Minority Leader going back to the end of the regular session in exchange for what he wants to see in terms of the governor lessening his executive authority. And that hasn't happened, so we've had no movement through 3 special sessions on the bonding bill. Now I think we've got an additional problem, which is the Senate not confirming some of Waltz's commissioners, one the labor and 2 others being held hostage, I think is creating another problem. Saying all of that, there are a number of people in both parties, all sorts of local government people and private sector people who really want to see this bonding bill passed. And it's looking like September is all or nothing. And so we're doing everything we can do to put the best case forward about why this is necessary for the state of Minnesota. So let me take you through the bonding, the transportation features of the bonding bill, and remind you that the MICA priorities in transportation this year, the top 3 priorities were solving the funding issue for the local road wetland mitigation program, putting forward a substantial amount of money for the local bridge program as defined by county bridges, and also significant new money for the local road improvement program. This bill, I think, responds to all 3, and let me just take you through the details. On the local road wetland mitigation issue, as you'll recall, as we got towards the end of the regular session, and it's only gotten worse since then, 5 of the 10 wetland districts around the state have no wetland credits left. 3 of the remaining 5 are almost at 0 also. And of course, if this issue isn't resolved by next spring, it'll cost everyone their spring construction season. So this is a significant issue. We've made the case. We have all sorts of legislators who seem to understand it and agree. And this bill would largely solve it. It has $18 million in bonds and $8 million up front in cash, which would break the logjam and get things moving again and get things on a schedule that would make some sense. It's really been a problem that's been building for better than a decade now. So that's in there. Then let's go to local bridges. We would have $30 million in competitive money statewide for local bridge repairs. We've got an agreed-to list of bridges all around the state that are all set to go, but for the money. So there'd be immediate movement and improvement on local bridges in this bill. And then in addition to the $30 million, there's $25 million dedicated to the St. Paul Kellogg Avenue Bridge, which the Republican Senate and the Democratic House both agree is a bridge of statewide significance. And so combined, that's $80 million in bridges, and that would be significant by any standard going back probably 20 years. Then we'll go to local roads. Again, a major investment in local roads from the context of the last 2 decades. $80 million, of which about $55 million of it is competitive local road money around the state. And then in addition to that, there's about another $25 million in specific projects, many of which would be in MICA counties. And that's about $400 million in general obligation bonds for transportation, which is a big number. And then in this bill, over and above that, is another $350 million in trunk highway bonds. So when you combine the two, you've got $750 million, $750 million going to roads and bridges. And that's a big number stacked up against any bill we've had over the last several years for transportation, so it's well worth fighting for. Let me just mention a couple of other specific components that were in our platform that this bill does address. Safe routes to schools, there'd be $2 million. Township road improvement program, $8 million. Port development assistance, $3 million. Minnesota rail service improvement, $3 million. Railroad warning signal replacements, $1 million. And then let me just touch on a few other things that are down in the south of the Twin Cities, down towards Rochester, including your area. But the city of Rochester Airport would be receiving $11.4 million. The Olmsted County Highway 14, County Road 104, $19.6. Greater Minnesota Transit, $2 million. Transportation Economic Development, $1.5 million, and that program, called the TED program, is the only counties eligible are the non-metro counties of the state. So combined, like I said before, we've got something over $750 million that would be going towards roads and bridges between general obligation bonds and trunk highway bonds. And I think by any definition that would be significant. Let me touch on some of the policy issues. Basically, there wasn't much done in that area because once COVID-19 hit, there was an agreement that if all 4 caucus leaders didn't agree, they wouldn't take up the bill. But there was an important bill that passed that directly affected your area back in March, and that was the broad bipartisan agreement that was reached early in the session to authorize the utilization of a unique federal transportation finance tool, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, TIFIA, to fund the reconstruction of the Nicollet to New Ulm stretch of Trunk Highway 14. Everybody down in your area knows all about Highway 14. So this was significant. It was agreed to and passed separate from other things back in March, and it was very, very good to get that done. So let me conclude by simply restating the grim details in the negative if this bonding bill does not pass. If it does not pass, there will be no local bridge bonding money. There'll be no money for the local road wetland replacement program, which will likely shut down the spring construction program. No Greater Minnesota Transit money, no port development money, no rail service development revenue, no bus rapid transit waste money, essentially no comprehensive transportation financing for the state. And so it's a dire situation. There's all sorts of reasons to get this passed. There's broad agreement between the Republican Senate and the DFL House. We can only hope that behind the scenes progress is being made with Representative Dowd on his issues, and we can get a straight up bill and vote on the bill. We know for a fact that if that happened in the Senate, it would be a broad bipartisan positive vote for this package. And we think the same would be true in the House. One of the other difficulties we've got is that under the rules, these bonding bills have to pass the House first. And so the minority leader's position on this since the end of the regular session has compounded the problem because it has to originate there. I think if we were able to get a vote in the Senate, it would be overwhelming and that would put more pressure on. But we don't have that situation. We have to deal with the cards we're dealt. So that's where it sits. That would be my report. I just want to add one final comment. And I know you already know this because you work with them all the time, but we want you to know that we feel that Ryan just does an excellent job in terms of being the county engineer, and he's very, very helpful. Gives us a lot of input on our engineer committee year-round, and really appreciate his participation and friendship. It's been a great relationship and really works well. So with that, I will conclude and be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was a great report. And as you well know, that we've worked together with transportation for years. I would really appreciate if you could send us that those bullet points of what happens if the bonding bill does not pass. That would be really helpful for me when I'm pushing for the bonding bill to my local representatives, and when I go to the Capitol and St. Paul and talk to them. I think that's super important. A lot of times people just don't understand what's going to happen if we don't get a bonding bill. So if you could send us those bullet points, that'd be awesome.
We can do that.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions for
welcome.
Steve?
I don't have any. Good report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Carly Stark, and I cover public safety for Micah. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Carly. How are you?
Good. So public safety didn't have quite as much action as most other sectors. Luckily, before the legislature sort of took a break because of COVID-19, they passed a $30 million transfer to the Disaster Assistance Contingency Account, because as we know, COVID-19 is not the only thing that's going on, especially in spring and summer in Minnesota. The Post Board created, there was legislation requiring the Post Board to create model policies for eyewitness identification, which is a step to try and increase procedural justice for criminal defendants. Chief law enforcement officers throughout the state are required to adopt a consistent written policy by February 1st of 2021. Another thing that did pass was a provision allowing the Department of Corrections to create a contract with county jails to allow county jails to continue to hold inmates that have 90 days left on their state sentence. This is similar to short-term offender legislation, except the difference is that counties are able to negotiate their own terms, meaning you can set a per diem rate you're comfortable with, you can possibly require health bills to be paid by the DOC, so that is much better than the previous legislation. Unfortunately, what did not pass was the Community Corrections Act and county probation officer funding. There was a lot of support for it, but it just didn't make it to the finish line, which everything in the supplemental budget also did not make it. I'm hopeful that next year the discussion will continue and that there will continue to be support for that funding. But I also think that a lot of counties and organizations will be looking at finding a more sustainable funding model for probation. Other things that did not pass was a rejection of the 5-year probation cap by the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines, meaning that effective August 1st, most felonies are capped at 5 years unless a judge finds that there are basically extenuating circumstances to increase that probation sentence. The other thing that on our PowerPoint, it says law enforcement accountability reforms did not pass. However, they did pass, I believe, in the second special session. So that's changed since we made this PowerPoint. And with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Carly?
Thanks, Carly.
Yep, thanks, Carly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What do we got next?
This is Matt Mossman. I will wrap up and then take any final questions you have. Thank you. I think that the big picture here, pulling out, obviously we have a lot of challenges. I'm going to work from slide 7 to just make some final comments and want to highlight the state budget conditions, and picking up on the comments of Commissioner Landcamer earlier regarding whether or not there will be a fourth package of relief in Washington, and if there is, whether or not it will include any additional support for state and local finances. You know, the challenges that we've been facing just addressing the COVID crisis, and there's been money flowing both at the state and federal level and obviously at the local level, and the CARES Act allocation related to that. But the state budget situation looking forward is very dire, frankly, and so that puts potential impact on counties right in the middle of the train track, potentially, as you have all experienced in state budget deficit situations in the past. And so that is what we're facing as we look forward, particularly if there's not some additional help for the state to mitigate those impacts. So what you have here is a summary on slide 11 of the current state budget condition as best we know it. The state issued a budget forecast in February, and then they updated that forecast numbers with some revisions in May, and then again here in July, that show that instead of a $1.5 billion balance for 2021 positive balance, we're now at about a $2.4 billion shortfall for the current biennium that will end June 30th of 2021. And so when they come back into session in January of this year, when the new legislature is seated after the fall election, they'll have only a few months between the legislature and the administration to address that $2.4 billion shortfall, or whatever it is, once we get an official budget forecast in December, and then another one in February of 2021. But we certainly expect that it's not going to be a good situation. Now, as you also see on that page, the state currently has the healthiest state budget reserve that it has ever had for this kind of circumstance, with about $2.4 billion also in, just short of $2.4 billion also in reserve, which is helpful. Then if you move to 2022-23, we now know, because of work that Minnesota Management and Budget did just a couple of weeks ago and released, that we have a gap between current law projected spending and current law projected revenues of $4.7 billion for the next biennial budget period. That's a legislature in 2021 will be setting the biennial budget for. My notes there on the right-hand side of the page are just to call out that we have multiple reasons to think that it could be even worse than that. The forecast for gross domestic product growth upon which those deficit numbers are projected are actually a bit worse now than they were when MMB used economic advisors numbers to build those numbers. So as you see for calendar year 2020, instead of a shrinking of the economy by about 5.4% over the calendar year, Minnesota's economic consultants, the most recent numbers have been that they actually think it's more like 6.1%, and new numbers, of course, will come along, so these will all change. And for 2021, there's originally a hope when all of this first started that we would have a very V-shaped reaction to the economy. Pretty much all economists are now believing that it's much more likely to be a U-shaped response to the economy and a much slower rebound in terms of GDP growth, which also does not bode well for these numbers bouncing back as quickly as we otherwise might hope. So that's the circumstance. Obviously, that means that we will be preparing as we look forward to the 2021 session, not only to reverse the phrase, a good defense is a good offense in terms of bringing the message of the work that county governments do forward to the legislature, being prepared to talk about maintenance of effort, impacts, and mandates, and the work that you all do at the local level on behalf of the state, but trying to make sure that we have impacts on counties mitigated to the greatest extent possible and be open to innovations and efficiencies like some of these waiver extensions in human services that I know counties have, frankly, think that there's some real significant opportunities that should go forward permanently there and want to have that conversation with the legislature. So let me stop there. That's the budget condition going forward. It's obviously going to impact non-state general funds also, like highway user funds. Our gas tax, sales tax revenues are likely to be down. So a lot of sort of bad news across the board that we will be working to prepare on your behalf to how we engage with the legislature on that in 2021. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I think we're extremely fortunate here to have Senator Rosen, who is the Chair of Finance, and Senator Frentz, who is in the leadership on the other side. So I think that's a real positive thing, and we have good relationships with them, so I think that's a plus.
Do you have anything else, Matt?
I would just, no, I do not echo that. Your Senator Frentz, Senator Rosen, your other delegation members have been fantastic to work with. As I said earlier, Senator Rosen was incredibly supportive of the role of local governments during the CARES Act distribution, and I fully anticipate that she will, continue to be a champion for us as we have these conversations in 2021. So I do want to thank Bob Meyer and his team, Laura Elbelbach, and just others that I work as well with, and all of you as members of the Inter-County Association and your participation on the MICA board. We really appreciate it. Always be nice to be out with you in person, but these are unique challenges, and just thank you for your time and appreciate your membership and support. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, man.
Thank you for the
Folks, have a great day. Thanks for all you do.
thanks for the report.
Great, thank you. You bet.
All right. And at this time, I think we'll go back to, is Mike Stolber?
I saw him in the hall.
Well, let's go to Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Good morning, everyone.
Michael.
All right, for anyone on the phone, I am Mike Stolberger, Director of Property and Environmental Resources. And Mr. Chair, I have 2 items if we want to get started with those.
Go right ahead.
All right, the first item that we have for you is a update for our CARES Act funding. The federal government did provide funding specific to elections uses for the 2020 federal election cycle. Those funds were distributed to the state, and then the state turned around and the legislature authorized those to be shared at the state and county levels to be further distributed to the municipality level. So what the state ended up doing was providing a block grant to the counties, and then they directed the counties to determine a method to allocate those funds to any of our cities and townships that have live election day polling places. They also did provide a default mechanism for sharing those funds if cities and townships weren't able to come to an agreement with the county. What we're going to be proposing here in Blue Earth County, what I've visited with our local officials on, is a hybrid approach to that, where those dollars will stay at the county level, and then each of our cities and townships that have elections on election day can request reimbursement up to the state's default amount. So if you work through me with the table that's on the bottom of that page 178 for you, Blue Earth County was allocated just under $51,709. It was rounded up there for you. And that portion of that, a portion of it stays at the county, $28,377. The remaining $23,300 is to be shared with the cities and townships, the vast majority going to Mankato. As I've worked with the clerks in those places, they have agreed with and they appreciate us holding those funds and then allowing them to reimburse for any plexiglass shields, some of them bought plastic folders for their voters, those sorts of things, and have those reimbursements come through us. What that allows us to do is use any of those excess funds for our needs rather than have to return that to the state if we would have sub-granted it down to the city or the township. So I've spoken with many of them directly. I've left messages with others who I have not heard back from, but as we've talked about it with our clerks in their meetings, they've all been open and agreeable to that. So what we'll be doing is bringing forward that proposal. That's the way that our agreement will be shared with the cities and townships and then passed on to the state. I'll also point out that there is a 20% match. And so we will be requiring the cities and townships to cover their 20% of the match. They can use their local CARES funds, just like we can use county CARES funds for that. So that will leave them cost neutral, but we're not going to absorb that portion. I'll essentially reimburse them or have the finance department reimburse them at 80% of the invoice that they submit to us. So that should work pretty well there. And so what the state is requiring us to do is actually have the county board approve a resolution, which is attached here. That allows us to submit our formal application to receive our $51,000 and some change there for use and distribution in the 2020 election cycle. The rest of the memo walks you through the reporting requirements that we have in some of those deadlines, but right now we're looking for just approval of the resolution. Mr. Chair, any questions?
I have a question. We do the city of Mankato's elections. So will the dollars, the 16,000 revert to us automatically? And will they also pay that 20% match?
Yep. So, Mr. Chair, the $16,000 is something that'll be kept at the county level. I visited with Allison on that as well as Renee. And so they understand that we would otherwise be going to them for additional costs for mailing and those sorts of things. So they're allowing us to keep those dollars locally. And then their cost share will be something that they'll need to pull out of their local funding.
All right.
Okay.
Disclaimer related to that, though, is if for some reason we wouldn't spend all of their money, then they wouldn't do the match for that full amount. Then it would become our match because it would be our dollars being spent if they don't spend all 16,000. But with the amount of mail balloting that we have and all of that, I would be surprised if they don't use that all up in City of Mankato expenses.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. Those dollars will stay with us.
Will
right?
stay with us, but if
Yeah.
it's not a City of Mankato reimbursable expense, they won't pay the 20% match on it. The county will. So let's say, for example, they only spend 15,000 of that on Mankato expenses. They would only do 20% match on the 15, and then we would cover the match on the remaining money to get us to the 16,000. They're only going to cover their expenses in terms of a match.
What are their expenses?
It'll be whatever works through the election year. We have until November 16th to cover whatever expenses come through. So that would be added judges, the PPE that we're providing for Mankato judges. Postage is a very large part of what these funds will be used for. polling place changes, curbside voting expenses, all of those things can be rolled out and distributed at that local level to the city or the township.
My assumption is they will probably all spend more than they're going to get.
Yep, and I would agree with that. However, because we're already getting some of the hand sanitizer and whatnot, some of our smaller cities like St. Clair and some of the townships, Decorah and Luray, are saying that they might not use up all of their funds directly, and that's why it's good for us to keep that in our pocket of money, because then we can turn around and cover postage. I mean, our postage budget is already used for the year, just with the number that we have there. So this will allow us to cover any of that added cost there.
One other question. There are some townships listed here. Are any of them looking at going to mail balloting?
The township, any of the jurisdictions listed in that table right now are not able to go to mail balloting. Mail balloting, the designation had to be made by July 1st for this year, so they're not able to change at this point for the November election. So those 9 folks there, plus the city of Mankato, those jurisdictions will all vote in a polling place on election day, unless something dramatic would change and we would have to do an emergency resolution to change their voting. But as of now, they will all be voting in a polling place on election day.
I was just curious because any of the townships could have gone there and didn't.
Correct. Yep, they had until July 1st to make that change, and we had 4 townships that changed under that provision, and we had 1 that changed prior to that as well in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, requesting approval of the attached resolution so that I can submit that and get those dollars brought down to the county level.
Bring it to the board.
Purvis moves approval.
Second. People?
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye. And that passes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item then for you is on page 181 of your packet. This is a resolution authorizing the execution execution of a grant for the flood acquisition program that we've been working with in Garden City. If you recall, back in January of this year, the board passed a resolution authorizing our department to sign in a sub-granting and a grant role for the flood project in Garden City. There are 3 properties there that have been prone to flooding. And so the federal government is providing $344,000 to help us with acquiring those properties and removing them. The Department of Natural Resources then comes in and helps cover half of the local share. The Department of Natural Resources in the past has allowed the federal agreement and the federal delegation of responsibility to cover. They're no longer allowing that. So they're now requiring us to come to you and ask you to delegate me as the director of the department to sign accepting their $54,000 for their portion of the project. We also then have the Lokeland owner match, which would cover that other $54,000 that would be coming up separately. But this is just asking for the board to authorize the resolution that delegates me to accept the $54,000 to match towards the FEMA money. Mr. Chair, any questions on that?
I have some questions. So we'll be getting the FEMA money, which I assume the chair has to sign off on?
The FEMA money will be coming in January. That was delegated to allow us to sign to accept those dollars.
Okay, I was just kind of surprised because usually the chair signs off on an amount that high.
Yeah, I believe if I go back to the minutes from that meeting, I think that was delegated.
I'm just asking the question because I think these are some things that the chair should sign off on. That being said, the DNR is going to do $54,000, is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The Department of Natural Resources is $54,284, which is about 12% because the county or they call it a local owner match. In our instance, it'll be an owner match. Needs to cover the other 12.5% to get us to 25% to match the 75% from the federal government. If you work back with me in numbers there. So 54 from the Department of Natural Resources, and you can see there's a commitment letter from the Department of Natural Resources on that, and then the 54,000 local match will be, there's some staff time that we can write off towards that to help buy down for our property owners, but then the property owners would be covering the additional expense to allow them to get out of a situation where they're living in a flood-prone area.
So in other words, the applicant will absorb that 12.5% with the exception of our staff time?
Correct, yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that 12.5% will be staff time, and then it'll be split amongst the 3 property owners. Property owners are still completely voluntary in this process, so if only 2 of them participate, then the 2 of them will share the costs associated with that. But as of right now, we're continuing to work with all 3 property owners.
Okay. I'd still like the chair to sign off on some of this stuff because I'd like to know what's going on, and I just think that's important.
On the local government resolution for flood hazard mitigation, do we have a motion?
I'll move approval, Brunder.
With the chair signing off?
No, I think just leave it the way it is now. And from what I understand, we've already given you the authority to sign off on this earlier.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, correct. So the January one was for the federal grant, the $340,000, and that was delegated to our office, which I haven't looked at, but I believe is the normal practice on that. I'm not sure without doing research. And then normally that would have covered the Department of
Right.
Natural Resources, and they've changed their policy to require us to get a separate resolution.
Yeah, it's the same way we did the other 3 or 4 properties that we bought years ago, correct? It's the same process.
I believe
Well, you
so.
wouldn't have been
I
involved,
wasn't
or
involved, but I
Ryan
believe
Mayo.
so. I've relied on Scott Salisbury, who's been involved in those, and that was
Yeah.
the same way it was brought forward there. So-
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the language the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
I
Okay,
think
we got a motion?
Yeah, it's been, I'll second.
I moved it.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'm going to vote against it because I do think the chair should sign off, but that's okay.
Any more discussion? Excuse me. Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis,
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
No.
Commissioner Stuenberg.
Yes. Okay,
All right, Mr. Commissioner,
Thank
Chair,
you.
Mr. Commissioners, I'm set. Anything else for me?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
When will ballots go up? Quick.
You and everybody else wants to know that. Ballots will be mailed out September 18th. That's the 46 days prior. That's the earliest we can do it. We are over 6,000. We're over 6,000 requests right now. So if we
Wow.
can get ballots in our hands, we can start building some of those packets to get them out. So,
6,000 requests already.
yeah,
Wow.
plus another 6,800 that'll vote by mail out of 38,500 voters. So,
I don't know.
Thank you.
We've been doing that for years.
yeah, they're coming left and right. So keeping us busy
Yeah,
downstairs.
mail-in voting's a good thing, right?
Yes, I have a question.
If it's done, yeah, the right way.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's working for you, Mark.
Yeah, it's done the right way, yeah.
I know you said that the legislature will be making a decision as to witnesses. Do you have any idea? Because if they don't make a decision, do we have to have witnesses at this point for the general, or does it automatically roll from the primary?
So the legislature decided not to act on it, and so then it was brought up in court because the Secretary of State had a consent decree with some litigants to say witnesses are not required. That was appealed. The appeal has been dismissed or dropped, so there will not be a witness requirement for anybody who is registered to vote if they're voting by absentee ballot or mail balloting. So that is final and determined. We also have up until 7 days after the election to receive a ballot that is postmarked on election day. So those are final, pending some other appeal that I would not be aware of, but we're being told we can move forward with those directions. So no witness for registered voters, and then up to 7 days after November 3rd for that ballot to be postmarked and returned to us.
One other question. What's the time frame for people to register to vote? I know they can go in person on election day, but is there a back off earlier?
Yep, Minnesota law allows us to register voters up until the 21st day before the election. So between now and, I should have that date memorized, but about 3 weeks before the election, folks can register and be considered a registered voter for absentee and mail ballot purposes. Otherwise, it's election day.
They have to go in person.
They don't have to go in person, they just would have to have a witness because they would be unregistered in their mail balloting or their absentee voting status.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful, because I wasn't sure how that
We're
worked.
getting tons of those phone calls, so I appreciate hearing them, and I believe we'll visit some more about that at a work session, so I can give you more information about all of our doings in the elections office.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay,
folks.
thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
And I think we'll jump right into our bills.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the bills for the 2 weeks indicated are next.
Brenda will move the bills.
Purvis seconds.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? I think only thing I had, well, actually there was a few, but the largest one probably was for Mathwoods and Construction for just under $1 million, $952,000. I would imagine that's for County Road 1.
I believe it is, yes.
All right. No other discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Yes. All right. Human Resources.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 9 in your packet is the Human Resources Department agenda. We have just one action item for the board's consideration today, and that is the approval of a Blue Earth County telecommuting policy and procedure. I think it's important for the board to be aware that staff felt a need to bolster our temporary telework agreement that was approved back in March. And so through the development of a more long-term telework policy, this addresses some of the important considerations for a successful telework agreement. The policy in your packet acknowledges the need for a policy that provides flexibility for the employer and the employee for jobs that are suitable for a telework arrangement. It's important that any telework arrangement work for both the employer and the employee, so we have developed this draft with that in mind. Generally speaking, the policy assumes the full job must be able to be completed in a telework arrangement. I will say, though, it is possible that some job descriptions may be altered slightly to fit a telework environment in some instances. A key tenet of the policy is that a telework agreement cannot negatively impact the work of other staff. And so we don't want someone out on a telework agreement to cause other employees to have additional work as a result of that. We do believe that this policy will provide additional flexibility for employees during the pandemic while ensuring county productivity standards can continue to be met. The policy provides clarity as to who is eligible to telework and how compliance with federal labor laws will be maintained. The policy also outlines expectations for employees regarding time off, safety, expenses, and data privacy sorts of issues. The pandemic may have pushed the development of this policy, but staff are excited to implement this as another tool to be used to meet our mission and to remain competitive in our recruitment and retention efforts. Based on this, staff are recommending approval of the telework policy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Anybody have a question?
I actually had a long conversation with Bob about this, and I do think it's really important that we be as flexible as we can. The governor's comments have been anybody who can telework should be able to telework. I also asked about you had to be here 12 months before you could telework. And Bob clarified that so much of in the first year there's a lot of training, so that could impact that, and I appreciate that. But knowing that there's some flexibility there also. My question about directors and supervisors not being eligible, that was clarified to say that they may telecommute at times, but it won't be a permanent thing like it is with some of the other employees. So that was very helpful. I'm still not sure about the higher caseloads. When I was at USD, I was told I could not do that. So I think that's something we still have to continue to look at if you're working from home. So that was part of my conversation, and it was very helpful. So I appreciate that. But I do think flexibility is really key in this. And, you know, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow with COVID. So appreciate this.
All right. Take it to the board.
I don't have any questions or comments. I would move approval. Brunder.
Purvis seconds.
Got a motion, got a second. Any more discussion? Good comments. Colton, thank you. Without any more discussion, Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye. All right. Bob?
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 10 in your packet is a Regional Transportation Coordinating Council resolution. This is a resolution that was requested by basically the MAPLE organization for consideration by the board here today. This is again another phase of planning around that Regional Transportation Coordinating Council. I will share with the board that the staff that we've had involved in the planning process to this point have been a little frustrated with a lack of clarity in terms of vision around where this planning effort is going. The Regional Transportation Coordinating Council kind of development is relatively new in the state of Minnesota. There's only a few RTCCs that have been established to this point. And so it is a kind of ground up development in terms of that regional transportation coordination. Staff expressed some concern about the time investment needed to support this effort, but we also recognize that there is a need for regional transportation coordination, and so with some slight modifications to the resolution that was initially brought forward to us, we are suggesting that the board support continuing to be a part of the planning effort, recognizing that our hands are full with COVID-related issues, and that while we'll continue to provide some staffing to support that effort, Blue Earth County is probably not in the best position to lead those efforts, and so wanted just to have that communicated through this resolution. Any questions?
I have a comment. I think in theory this makes such great good sense, but it's the implementation that's a challenge. So I mean, I want to make sure that as it moves forward now, and make sure in the future that we really do have all those pieces put together, because I don't think they're there yet. So on that note, I'll move the resolution, this resolution today.
Purvis seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
I would concur with Clean regarding opinion on these discussions, and I don't know if they're kind of looking for someone to really, they say it's, it's not a commitment or dollars or whatever, but yeah, it's kind of still iffy. Yeah, see how the direction goes. I think the idea in my head isn't so bad because it's out of the place. But yeah, kind of just go along and see how it works.
Without any more discussion, Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 11 in your packet is an application for a PACE loan from the Old Town Development Group LLC. This is coming to us through the St. Paul Port Authority, and the request really is being driven by the lender associated with this particular project. This is a redevelopment project at, I believe, 505 Riverfront Drive, the old dry cleaner down there. And so this is an area that's ripe for redevelopment. The basic ask of the county is that we will place an assessment on the tax rolls to collect the financing needed to support this effort. And so our only role in this application process really is to indicate via resolution that the county board authorizes that assessment to be placed.
Purvis moves approval.
People seconds.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just a question, does the St. Paul, the Port Authority do all the PACE loans? Do you know?
No.
They do the larger ones. In our case, we usually work with the Rural Minnesota Energy Board on smaller PACE loans in our county, but they set, I believe, $100,000 limit.
Yes.
Is that right, Commissioner
Yes.
Purvis? And so projects of this size have typically gone through the St. Paul Port Authority.
Thanks, that's helpful. I didn't know who had authority for that.
Well, this is, that area is certainly ripe for development. It's, you know, they took down 2 different buildings, and both of them that were not being used. In fact, the old laundromat was in disrepair and hadn't been in for years, so it'll be a real plus for the city of Mankato and Blue Earth County to have some good development in that area. And it also will really help Old Town area.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll be completely supportive of this.
I agree, and I think if I remember correctly that the dry cleaners was a brownfield, so
Yes.
Yep.
this will be a good thing.
Yep. Any other discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 12 then is a request to accept the donations for the second quarter of this year. You'll see we did receive monetary donations in the total of about $8,700. Majority of it going to our library, and so we really appreciate those contributors to the efforts of maintaining library services during this COVID-19 environment that we're in. We also had some in-kind donations given to the library, specifically to the summer reading program, and then we also had some volunteer time as well. And so staff are recommending acceptance of these donations.
I'll move approval of accepting the donations.
People second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Jesse, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner People,
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis.
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder,
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer,
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg.
Aye. And that brings us down to the end, doesn't it, Bob?
Just the reports from commissioners.
Just the reports from the commission. Let's start with clean today.
Okay. On the 11th, all of us were at the Farm Bureau annual meeting, and we were lucky enough to be able to thank Senator Rosen for her commitment in trying to get the dollars out to counties. It ended up being allocated that way, and she pushed hard. Well, it didn't pass. The governor did it. It was great to have her working on that for all of us. And AMC Board of Directors, Vance was on that also. A couple of the issues that we're going to be talking about in September at the next board meeting is there will be policy meetings, and if you're on a policy committee, you should have gotten an email saying when they are. We're going to be talking about does the leadership at AMC get extended, or do we stay with the normal movement of that? The other thing is, do we have our annual conference or not? So those are a couple of the big things we'll be talking about then. On the 14th, Vance and I have the canvassing board. 71% of the people who voted voted by mail. So I think that's a pretty good number.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
On the 17th, Josh and I had a discussion with the city of Mankato, Mayo, and the county, talking about racial equity and how do we work together on that project as opposed to each one of us doing our own thing. Not that we're not going to have to look at ourselves anyway, but you know, that umbrella, and who else needs to be part of that umbrella. So first meeting, more to come. On the 21st, I did the drive-through for Bill James. My first drive-through wait. So that was an experience. On the 24th, yesterday, I sat in on the AMC CARES Act. I thought there was some really good information in it from 5 different counties. The importance of communication was stressed time and time again. Dakota's doing some broadband that they think they can get done by December 1st. They've been reaching out to various vendors, and it looks like it might be a possibility for them to do that. I hadn't heard of anyone else doing broadband before that, so that was interesting. The other thing is, I think it might have been Dakota also, in the library they bought some Chromebooks, so, and hotspots. So students who don't have access to technology can use those and check those out. So I thought that was kind of a good idea. As you all know, county money's got to be allocated by December 1st, cities and townships by November 15th. And I know that administration's been reaching out to our cities and townships to see if they're going to use if they think they're going to use their money. So if we can know that ahead of time so we can partner and not all of a sudden find out that they're not going to use it when there isn't much time left. That's all I have, sir.
All right. Kip?
I actually had a relatively light couple weeks. As Colleen already mentioned, I was at the Farm Bureau program, which was lightly attended.
Yes.
I think other than us elected officials, there wasn't a whole lot of constituency there for the group. But you know, in these times, people are nervous and they really weigh whether or not they think they should go out. Mark and I had Micah, but there's no need to elaborate on that because the staff did a fine job just a few minutes ago. And we had our MVAC personnel meeting, and things are going along well there, approving a lot of stuff for Head Start. And of course, Head Start is still up in the air with trying to how they're going to get going. And of course, we have all kinds of plans in place. What happens if you do get a COVID student, and so they're working through all of that. And then just several other constituency calls and drainage issues with the rain. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Will?
Okay, of course, I had the Farm Bureau meeting also, and we got some very good recognition for having all 5 commissioners at the meeting, so that was wonderful to see. It was good to see Senator Rosen there. I too was at the Bill James's visitation at the drive-through. I was a little nervous about that, but I thought it worked very well. It was good to greet the family, and of course Bill was a longtime employee of Blue Earth County and a big asset to our community. On 21st, I had or the 20th, I should say, I had the extension advisory meeting, and I would have to say that I had a very first on that. I had a Zoom meeting from my camper in a beautiful Jackson County Park. So, it went surprisingly well using my hotspot. So joint meeting for South Bend Township on the 21st regarding some planning and zoning issues. And later that day, I participated in the MSU Criminal Justice Review Work Group, which is interesting. They're looking at their curriculum and how to improve it as we move forward. So that's my report.
Okay, Mark?
Well, of course, yeah, we were all at the Farm Bureau and picnic, and there was, almost more elected officials, and including the state senator, and there were people there. It was good. Then, as Kip mentioned, Micah, we did have that Zoom meeting, and that was all covered. Friday, the 14th, they did have our All Seasons Arena board meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, and we just kind of got one piece of ice going with people have to dress up like before they go in, and it's working. And we did spend a little, but we actually saved a lot because we did do some LED lighting. We got a lot of rebates from Excel and stuff, so that's actually an area where the pricing has really gone down. So we were able to do that without any big problem. 18th did do that Zoom thing with the RTCC open house on the planning process for with MnDOT SRF on that. We had the resolution we had passed, so we did that on the 18th, and that I didn't make the little change. I was going to try to get to that, but didn't make that. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, mine follows about what everybody else of. Right after our board meeting, I did have a NACO Transportation Committee meeting, and then the Farm Bureau meeting that was talked about, an AMC board meeting on the 12th. I had a Highway 169 corridor executive board meeting on the 13th. Let's see, the primary canvassing, election canvassing with Colleen on the 14th. Well, I had my retired officer shoot on the 18th for my permit to carry. That went well, you know. On the 19th, I had an AMC board talk with Julie Rosen. And she had requested, I'm sure she's talked to you already, she had requested all the board members to just kind of a phone conversation, since with this COVID, she's not able to meet with people one-on-one. So we had a nice half an hour talk between each other. That was kind of nice. On the 20th, I had a TDS board meeting. All these are on Zoom. This morning, I had an airport commission meeting. They comment a lot about the president's meeting or visit and stuff, so but things are going well, and that's the end of mine. Anything else good for the county there, Bob?
That's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn.
Before we do that, I actually think we should put together the numbers for the costs that happened because of the president's visit. I think we need to do that. I'm not saying we're going to be reimbursed, but I think we should have those numbers.
I can tell you that I did reach out to the sheriff earlier today, and he indicated that we're going to bill $14,000. Actually, the city of Mankato will be doing the billing on behalf of both organizations. We don't know whether we'll be reimbursed or not.
Thank you. I just think the documentation's important.
All right.
I'll move approve. I move we adjourn.
Second. We got a motion and a second. Jesse, could you call a roll, please?
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Purvis?
Aye.
Commissioner Brunder?
Aye.
Commissioner Landcamer?
Aye.
Chair Stuenberg?
Aye. We are adjourned.
Woo.